Hello, everybody. Kay Crystal Griffith here, back for another daily digest of emotions, wisdom, and your body. And today, as you can tell, I'm doing it midday and there's so much light and I can't quite figure out how to get rid of all of it. So bear with me. I am here. I just look like a white shadow. I'm so glad you guys are able to join us today to remind you that emotions are your body's wisdom. So here's your disclaimer. I am not a doctor. I do not play one on any social media platform. What I am is a researcher. I have my master's in education and I have trauma certifications as well as inner healing accreditations. So I hope that you will take from this some education, edification, and encouragement. So what is our topic for today? Panic. Have you ever been in a situation where you just have no idea what just happened, but it has thrown you up into chaos? That's pretty much panic. It's a sudden, uncontrollable fear or anxiety, often causing wildly unthinking behavior. And you react in ways that you probably wouldn't have ever reacted in had you not been in a state of panic. And this behavior can lead to something called a panic attack. The Mayo Clinic defines this as a sudden episode of intense fear that triggers severe physical reactions when there's no real danger or apparent cause. Panic attacks can be very frightening. And when panic attacks occur, you might think you're losing control, maybe having a heart attack, maybe even dying. And they can happen at a later time. They don't have to happen triggered from an event. I know some people who had an event happen on a Thursday and the panic attack did not happen until a Sunday when they were recounting the story. And it was as if they were right there and that trauma was so intense. So this is a negative emotion. And what effects does it have then on your body? The neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and GABA are specifically believed to be linked to mood and anxiety disorders. That's also why serotonin, dopamine, and GABA are so effective for you to work on different things for anxiety within your home. And you don't have to have a prescription for those, but you do want a reputable company. And if you'd like some referrals, just let me know. These neurotransmitters that we're talking about are really in charge of regulating those various bodily and mental functions. It's also all from where? The frontal lobe. Yeah, that amygdala sets in, begins dispersing some of those neurotransmitters, and then it hijacks the frontal lobe. Researchers have found that those with panic attacks often have an overactive amygdala. While it's not clear what creates this overactivity, the fact that the area of the brain seems to contribute to panic attacks indicates that it's some aspect the brain is in control of then during that panic attack experience. So they've actually done some research studies, MRIs, CAT scans, that the brain tends to light up in this area when there's an intense panic attack happening. So the amygdala is the control center for activating the fight, flight, freeze, or faint. Don't forget fawn. And then really that activation in the amygdala sends it where? So you may remember, you got it, central nervous system. And then at the same time, hijacks the frontal lobe. Boy, that amygdala is pretty intense at times, isn't it? Got fingers and everything, doesn't it? When our defense mechanisms malfunction, this can result in an over-exaggeration of the threat. So that molehill now has become a mountain, and it leads to an increased anxiety and in extreme cases, this panic that we're talking about today. And that's according to Dean Mobbs, a researcher at Columbia University. So what happens if there's too much panic? Well, let's straighten out a couple of things between stress and panic. There is a difference between stress and panic. And stress is anything that puts an extra burden or requirement on any part of your actual bodily system. It could be physical, psychological, or emotional. And it's important to note that not all stress is bad because it can help us focus, it can help us work harder and get things done. Now, a panic attack, on the other hand, describes a particular collection of symptoms that occur sometimes spontaneously, and other times when a person experiences overwhelming stress. So that overwhelming stress can lead to the panic, but they are definitely two different things. Now, this is a subjective feeling of panic, like perhaps sometimes you even feel like you're going to die. And the attacks are associated with physiological changes, like the elevated heart rate, the respiratory rate system, and where do those live? Central nervous system. So all those are activated from the fight, flight, freeze, or faint or fawn. I'm trying to put all of them in there for you, and I keep missing one. And so when the central nervous system is activated, remember we have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems, and we talk about those in a couple of our editions earlier. But where did it really come from, which is the amygdala, right? So in periods of severe stress, and when it's prolonged or sustained, exactly what many, many, many people experienced during 2020, right? All these different stress responses begin to produce changes in the brain. That's why this long-term quarantine has not been healthy, literally, for our brain and bodies, right? It's actually altered the brain chemistry and circuitry that can make some people's brains more susceptible to stress and the next time that it occurs. So if somebody brings about another pandemic situation, and however that may happen, our bodies are going to go right back to where they were in 2020. And that stress load is not going to start from a 0 or a 1. It's going to start from a 5 or a 6. And that actually begins to set you off into PTSD as well, because now your body automatically remembers that circuitry. It goes up all those levels immediately, and then it starts from there. So it never gets back down to 0. So that can be an issue as itself. So in other people's brains, though, that are not as susceptible to the stress, different changes might do the opposite, making the person even more resilient in times of stress. And you do see those two different types of people that we saw in 2020, ones that, were really living in the fear of what was going on and what could happen, and those who were not. And neither one is right or wrong, but we just had it very clearly two major different groups of people. Now, what do we do for countermeasures? How do we handle panic? Well, a couple of things to remember. People who are optimistic tend to be more resilient. Seeing that challenges pose difficulties, but they also pose opportunities that can allow each of us to drive into our resilience and become problem solvers, solution seekers. A belief system, your faith, also helps greatly. Understanding that you don't have to be in charge of everything, and then having the word really sewn into your heart and your mind and your thought processes of when you're in those situations and they come to your mind like this. I'm telling you, that is night and day to get you through some really tough crises sometimes. Physical exercise is always good for resilience. It's a great way to let off energy as well, even if you take a walk. Eating a healthy, balanced diet, always key, because that's going to keep all of your systems in check and moving and functioning well. Now, through inner heart healing, identifying any root traumas that really incited the initial panic feelings, that's going to always help alleviate the need to have the panic or even the body to create the panic. Oftentimes, when we find in our heart healing, is our bodies have needed to create something that we've told it needed to solve a problem. And so when it solves that problem, we then go back to that problem solving skill. Now, that problem solving skill is not always a positive situation because oftentimes it leads us into a victim mentality, perfectionism, control, any number of things that we've talked about. And so that can lead to even higher anxiety. But we think it's solving the problem. That's really not. It's creating a bigger one. So we definitely want to make sure that we're keeping in touch with our inner heart healing. And if there's something that's triggering you, let's deal with it, right? So what are our wisdom verses today? Isaiah 43:2. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, and fires that will not set you ablaze. So sometimes just remembering you're not going to die. This is not terminal. This is not something that's going to cause you to lose your life. And that can make a huge difference. Hebrews 13:5. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because the God says, never will I leave you and never will I forsake you. And that last piece is really the key, what we're looking at. Never will I leave you and never will I forsake you. And when you really grab hold of that in your heart from the Lord, you know you are never alone. And that can even influence that loneliness maybe that you've been feeling before. Jonah 2:2, in my distress, I called upon the Lord and he answered me. We have to go with the expectation he will, because he wants to. And from deep in the realm of the dead, I called for help and you listened to my cry. God hears every cry that you have. He collects every single one of those tears. And I don't know if you guys have seen that meme going around, but it's different types of tears, like ones you get with onions and ones that you get crying and ones that you get tears of joy and ones that you get that heartache, that heartbreak. And they're all different types of tears. Isn't that fascinating? That even God has created differences in our tears for the type of tears that we have. I just think it's all striking. Matthew 6:34, last verse. You may already know this one. Do not worry about tomorrow, for each day has enough worry of its own. Right? Just stick with today, the moment, be present. You're okay. Now, how are you going to use this new information about panic? How are you going to apply it to your life? Remember, wisdom is not just the hearing, but the understanding and the application. So your 3 questions for the day. How has panic been showing up in your life? Has it been negative, or do you think it has been positive? Why? And how can you transform panic by wisdom, understanding, and knowledge as you walk in it moving forward? So take those scriptures, add your name to them. Therefore, do not worry, Rosie, about tomorrow, because each day has enough worry of its own. Do not worry about tomorrow, Jake, because each day has enough worry of its own. Tomorrow's word is numb, almost the opposite of panic, where panic has this flood of emotions that have almost just paralyzed you and now you think you're going to die. But numb is the opposite of panic, to the other extreme of not feeling anything. And why? It'll be interesting. So join us again tomorrow for more emotions, wisdom in your body. Register at K Crystal Griffith to receive more insights and your feelings wheel. Until then, you guys have a blessed day and enjoy this amazing weather out there. It's like 55 in the Rockies. It's gorgeous. Take care, guys.